Hey, welcome back to the High Ticket Woman, where we explore the hard work behind healthy relationships and a grounded faith. I'm your host, Debbie Caudle, therapist, coach, yes, but also just a woman striving to be the best I can be in my own marriage. So I'm all about helping couples cultivate healthy marriages, healthy families, and lives that reflect the peace and purpose of God. So each conversation that we have here is an invitation for you to grow, heal, and rediscover your true value, not by not just by striving harder, but by walking closer with God. So, welcome to today's episode. Today, I am super privileged to welcome to the High Ticket Woman, Danielle Bernock. She's an international award winning independent author, speaker, and trauma informed, faith based self love coach. She's the founder of 4F Media and creator of her own S.E.L.F. That's an acronym, Process for Life Transition Transformation. Danielle, welcome to the High Ticket Woman.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. Now, you're known as that lady on the internet who loves you. How did that beautiful identity come about, and what does it represent to you?
Represents the core of who I am. It came about just as the pandemic was starting over on the other side of the planet.
Mm,
Love is the core of all that I do. Love is what saved me from destroying myself. Love is God is love, and
mhm,
love is extremely important to me. It's our greatest need as human beings. And as I felt the fear in the atmosphere prior to the pandemic, to me, it was tangible. I could feel it.
yeah.
And it wasn't even over here yet. And it was so confusing on top of that. I still remember going to pick up my granddaughter from school, and there were parents there, other parents, I'm picking up their kids, and they were talking about picking up their kids from college because they were being sent home from college. And I'm like, that's just really strange. And it just felt very bizarre.
Yeah.
But I felt this uneasiness, this fear in the atmosphere. It's like, what can I do about it? I had to do something. I felt compelled to do something about it. And I know that it's written that perfect love casts out fear. I'm not perfect, but I can definitely put some love out there. So that's what I strove to do, was to, how do I put love out there? I need to be putting love out there. I need to be putting love out there to battle this fear that I'm feeling. And I did lives. I was doing lives at the time, and I would go live on Facebook and do some sort of encouragement, something or other, and then say, I'm a lady here that I love you, and I want to tell you I love you. And I stumbled all around it for a while of, I'm on the internet, and until one day I coined that phrase. I am that lady. It's like I took ownership of that personality and turned it into a hashtag, and I've had it ever since. And people sometimes challenge it. How can you love me? You don't know me. I don't need to know you. You are worthy of love because you exist. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to earn it. You deserve love because God created you to be loved. And people need to hear that. We
They
live in a
really
world
do.
full of so much turmoil, things coming against us, that we need to know that we're loved. Because if you know, like really know deep in your bones that you're loved and you don't doubt it, it changes everything in your life.
It
Just
really
change
does.
everything.
Now you have this incredibly powerful story of healing and sort of discovery of being loved. So for those who are new to you and your work, can you share how your own journey from childhood trauma led you to this path?
Well, healing from it is what led me to what I do now. It was
Mhm.
writing my first book, Emerging with Wings, sharing that with people, hoping that, maybe I was pretty timid at the time. I released
Mm.
it 11 years ago. I was pretty timid. I was terrified when I self-published it and pushed the button on what was Create Space at the time that doesn't exist anymore. Pushed the button to release it to the world as if it was, in front of everyone on the planet, but I was terrified. I felt like I had stripped off all my clothes and was running around the world naked is what it felt like. But I hoped in my desire to help people, that just maybe if I could help one or two people or something, it
Mm.
was worth it to me to make myself that vulnerable. But the response to it was exceeded what I expected. I had people that I knew and people I didn't know reaching out to me after they got the book and saying, "You feel this way too? I feel like I'm not alone." And one of my favorite contacts I had from one of my readers is she lost electricity the day that she got my book, and she read the whole book in one day. And she said she read it with the a flashlight so that she could finish reading it. And it was like,
Wow.
to feel like your story could touch anyone that deeply, even one person that deeply, I felt compelled that I I can't hide this. I have to
Mm.
I have to grow a pair, as I say, and get out there and do something with this because I can help people. And I have a quote in my book that went viral, which also just flabbergasted me because it was my epiphany. It was the revelation I got that helped me to really heal because I dismissed my trauma. I didn't take ownership of it. I compared it with everyone else's and I didn't know what trauma was. I misdefined trauma like the vast majority of people do. People define trauma as something that happened to you, which is even better than, before Oprah got came out with her book of what happened to you, which is far better than what's wrong with you. But it's not the event. The event is not trauma. Trauma is a wound on the inside of a person. It's inside you where you can't see. It's invisible. It's why it's hard to validate it because you recognize it by how you behave, how you react, by the side effects of it. And I needed my counselor, because I went into counseling, to write that book to show me things I didn't know. I just there were some things I knew had affected me, but I struggled to call it trauma because it wasn't bad enough for me to call it that. But my epiphany was that trauma is personal. Two people can go through the same thing and come out completely different. And my counselor validated that, yeah, what I went through in first grade, no, that wasn't the same as the Sandy Hook murders. No, it wasn't the same, but that doesn't make it nothing.
Right.
But I made it nothing because I compared it to that. I felt if I owned what seemed small to me at the time, that I was negating these other people. And that's such a lie. It is such a lie. Both, both, two things can be true at the same time. Two things can be true at the same time. That Sandy Hook massacre was awful, and all the school shootings, and you know, trauma is all over the place. It is such an epidemic that the more I learn and the more I grow and the more I share, the more I want to learn and grow and share more because people need to be validated. They need to see that whatever they've gone through, it matters, which is why I tend to steer away from the big T, little t traumas. They're out there
Right.
defining those. And I've been through training where, I understand what they mean by that, but I don't think it's
But who
helpful.
gets to label? Right, who
Yeah.
gets to label whether your trauma is big or,
Yeah.
little?
It's not big enough. It's not, you can't even make it a capital T.
Yeah.
So people, they negate it that way. And
Yeah.
we need to not do that because if you're wounded and you're hurting, getting healed matters. And I care about that deeply.
Yeah. So you wrote Emerging with Wings 11 years ago, and you were in your 50s at the time. What brought you to the point where you said, "I," even though it was the scariest thing, to do, what brought you to the point that you realized, "I want and need to write this story and put it out there for the world?"
I'll give God the credit for that. I had thought about writing a book a number of years earlier, but had no concept that I could write at all. So I kind of shelved it. I mentioned to my husband, he wrote stuff for, I don't even remember what. I don't know why I thought he could write it, but somehow I thought, well, maybe you can write it. And it got shelved for many years. Then after a transformative time in my life, we had moved to Arizona for 5 years from Michigan. I live in Michigan. And during the recession back in 2007, my husband had gotten laid off. and he couldn't find a job anywhere. He ended up we talked about it and he started looking in other states, 'cause we didn't really wanna do that, and an opportunity came along in Arizona, and we talked about it, we prayed about it. We went out to a restaurant to talk about it and to, like, really dig in. "God, what do you want us to do?" And we felt God was giving us this.
Mm.
And even though that was terrifying, I'd never been to Arizona, didn't know anyone in Arizona, um, born and raised in Michigan. So going to Arizona was twofold. It was absolutely terrifying, but it was also such an adventure that Holy Spirit put just a sense of adventure in me to do that, to go and do this, even though it was still terrifying and it affected me physically. I ended up having panic attacks and having to go on Xanax. So
Ooh.
calling it adventure didn't make it easy. God walked me through that. He changed who I was. He helped me to take ownership of myself in a way I had never done before in my life. And this wording that I have now is not wording I had back then. I just stumbled my way through it back then, but he brought songs into my life to help usher me through that time in my life where I was looking at myself and owning who I was and letting go of all the coercion and manipulation that I had lived under for so many years on a multitude of areas of my life that I was afraid of. But I was going to a place where I could reinvent myself and I didn't have anyone there to judge me because they didn't know who I was. And one of the songs God gave me had to take me to a place where no one knows your name. Yeah, I was a part of it there, and the freedom of discovering who I was and it being different than who I had been, and it's not like I'd been living a lie, I had been living under compulsion and coercion and oppression in a variety of ways, and moving to Arizona for 5 years, I became a free person on the inside. I came face to face with trauma triggers and was treated in a way that was full of grace and mercy and love that astounded me, that ushered me into a healing of a trauma that I experienced when I was 6 years old that was still affecting me when I was in my 50s, which is validation enough. See, if you ignore it, it does not go away. It just resurfaces like a beach ball under the water.
Yeah, and time alone doesn't heal trauma.
No, it does
No,
not. It goes
it
sepsis if you
sits.
don't do anything about it. But
Good
it was
word,
through
sepsis.
that change of who I was after we moved back to Michigan. I was doing a devotional. I have a time I spend with God in the morning in prayer and various different things of my morning routine.
Mhm.
And I was doing this one devotional, and the title of it was Dare to Decide. And I remembered it was September 29th. And it just that dare to decide hit me in a way as if Holy Spirit was saying, today's the day. I dare you to do this. I dare you to start doing this kind of thing in a coaxing, loving way, not in a nasty way. And I did. I said, okay, I'll start today. I'm going to start writing a book today. I have no idea what that means, but that's what we're doing. And so that is the day I started investigating it, looking into it. What does it mean to write a book? What am I going to do? I should probably go into counseling to do this because I'm going to be looking at stuff in my life that maybe it'd be good to not do alone. Oh, that was God all the way. Because it was good that I had help because she helped me unpack the whole second half of my book. The whole second half of my book, I did not know or validate until I was writing it and I was in counseling. So that's why it was so scary to put it out there. It was healing while I was writing my book.
While you're writing, yeah. You said that childhood trauma is an epidemic, and
Yes.
that you talked about how you have minimized your own trauma, and that many adults dismiss or minimize their trauma or maybe the trauma of other people. So you haven't referred specifically to your trauma, but what are some of the subtle ways that unhealed trauma sort of shows up in our adult relationships and our daily lives?
Well, how we treat ourselves
Mhm.
and how we treat others. There's things out there called attachment theory, if people aren't familiar with it, I will, simplify, because we can be healthy relationships where you can have um, healthy conversation, a reasonable amount of vulnerability, because that depends on the depth of your relationship. You can have conflict and resolve it in a healthy manner. That would be a healthy attachment because conflict is part of life. But if you have one of the other ones that are not healthy, you will avoid conflict, or you will always cause it, or you will go from one to the other, or you will live in hiding all the time and never tell anyone anything. You'll not ask for help because you don't trust anybody, and or you feel compulsion that you have to do it yourself. You'll be a control freak. You could be afraid of everything. Lots of different ways to see how that would manifest in our relationships. We don't know how to talk to other people. We would have no boundaries, saying yes all the time, always trying to please people, make them happy, because if they're not happy, then they're going to leave us. Or over apologizing for yourself all the time, even when you haven't done anything wrong. It's almost like you're apologizing for existing. And I did that. So on my website, I do have a free assessment that will help people to see how much is your childhood affecting you now. And what
Mm,
it does is it will land you into one of four categories that fall into my self process: see, expose, love, or free. And if you fall into the C category, you have a lot of work to do. If you fall into the exposed category, you've done some, but you still have a good piece of stuff to do. If you fall into the L category, you've done some good work, but you know, keep doing what you're doing, and you probably still use some little more help. And then free category, you've probably done a lot of work. Just keep doing what you've been doing, and maybe you can help someone else.
so we'll grab that information here, when they get to the end so that people can go take that free assessment. That sounds like a really powerful tool. I'm glad you brought up your self process. So this is an acronym, S.E.L.F, and this is your process for life transformation. Can you walk us through what self stands for and how it helps us move from survival to, healing?
Absolutely. I got that process when I was creating my first course, Heal Your Childhood Self, because it's based on my book, Emerging with Wings. And my self process is not in this book. I, s- I was praying about it, going, how do I take what's in there, which is my story, written like a love story, which takes you on a journey, but it's not a self help book. It's not a process. I'm like, God, how do I simplify this into a way that someone else can use it? And he showed me how he did that. And it started with awareness. And the S in self is C, which is all about awareness. Because if you're not aware of something, you can't do anything about it. So you have to see what is going on in your life. You have to see what is the trauma that you have. You have to see how are you behaving. You have to see how are you feeling. You have to see. You have to become aware. But awareness all by itself is not good, because you can be aware of things and do nothing about it. And then
Right.
nothing happens. Nothing changes. So I have to go into the E for expose, which is to expose what's underneath that. What's behind that? What's the cause of that? Why? Okay, so you have all these side effects. Why? What happened? What's going on? You have to go deeper into that. But then the L is love, which is the crucial step. Because if you could see and expose and you stop there, you're going to go to bed and pull the covers over your head and you're done. But the L
Need
is
to remember all this. Yeah.
the L is love, where you have to give yourself comfort and courage. You have to fill your love tank so that you have the courage to move forward, to do something about what you have seen and what you have exposed. So you need to love yourself. You need to get love from all the other places, from family, friends, from God, from even animals. They can get us love. Like, get the love you need so that you will have the support and the strength and the courage to move into the F, which is free. And those are the action steps to begin to address what you need to address in your life. I have a variety of workshops and I have a different kind of self that I create for them. I have the loving self, the calming self, the trauma informed self. And so it's different ways of applying it, but it's always see is awareness, exposing is why. So it's see the what, expose the why, love the who, and free the what of what to do.
Mm,
It's the transformation. And it's not just one and done. It's a cycle that you go
mm,
through one at a time, one thing at a time, because everybody can do one thing. And if you demand too much of yourself at the onset, you're going to end up doing nothing. So you need to pick one thing and do one thing. And then after that one thing isn't a thing anymore, then you can do one thing again. And that builds.
yeah,
It builds.
yeah. It's almost like there are I mean, this is certainly something that I see when I work with clients. Everybody's in their own sort of phase,
Mhm,
and so some people are in the awareness phase, they're getting awareness. Some
mhm,
people, they've been aware for a long time, right? But they're afraid to do anything. So I love that you have this very, this process, pretty simple but powerful process
mhm,
for helping people understand that there are phases to this. But many Christians, they struggle with this idea of self-love, right?
mhm.
So they might see it as selfish. They might even see it as unbiblical. So how do we as Christians reconcile the idea of self-love with what we know God says, to do, which is to esteem others better than ourselves, to have humility, to submit one to another. Um, I think there's this misconception sometimes that we have as Christians about what self-love is. Maybe you could speak to that.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to so much because that is why my process is called self, to address the stigma of self. It's like self has been turned into a dirty word in many places, as if self equals self centeredness. To get specific without to split the hair for clarity, not for, strife, selfish by definition simply means thinking about yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
If we're supposed to self reflect to, grow spiritually, then we have to be selfish. We have to think about ourselves. What am I doing? How am I behaving? Am I doing what Jesus said? You have to think about yourself for those things. So selfish actually isn't bad. We use it in America and in the world in a way that is the definition of self-centered. Self-centered or self-focused is different than selfish. And people tend to think of selfish means self-focused, and that's not really what it means, but in usage, people tend to go there, which is why I made my process self. It's simple. It's to speak to the stigma of self. It is not a dirty word. And I suffered religious trauma and spiritual trauma, which attacked that self. Those scriptures using self, which I address in my book, Because You Matter, I have a section on that, dealing with that self. Because and actually, in Emerging with Wings, in the puzzle pieces that's in there about identity, my identity was attacked because we're supposed to die to ourselves. And so we're supposed to not exist. And it was confusing to me because if Jesus died for me to save me, but I need to kill myself and he's the only one that's going to exist, then I was so confused. It didn't make any
Mhm.
sense. So, this, dying to self is taught in such a wonky way.
Mhm.
I like to separate, the self, look at yourself as your soul. Look at yourself as who God created. He said, with patience, you possess your soul. If you look at the self or the flesh that it's talking about in scripture of dying to and, denying, look at the ego. Separate, look at the ego that way. The ego is the one that wants to kick God off the throne and sit there yourself. That's the ego. That's not who God created you in your spirit and in your soul. So I separate it out that way. If you could see yourself as who God created you and look at the ego is the one that gets all nasty and the one who wants to hurt other people. So if you separate it out that way, then
Mhm.
Also, the third reason I created the self process is because this in yourself is where your choice resides. Your choice resides inside yourself. And I want to empower people in their choices because it's humans are the only ones who have the power of choice like we do. I mean, animals can choose whether to obey or not, but it's not the same as a human being. And God esteems our choice so much, He put it right in the garden, front and center, in the middle. Our choice is important to Him. So I want to honor that like He honored that your choice matters and that resides in yourself. No one can make a choice for you. We feel like it sometimes. And when we feel like someone's making a choice for us, it's coercion or manipulation, and that is not a free choice. So I always want to separate those out. If you feel like you're not making the choice, something is wrong. There's some kind of manipulation or coercion going on because when we are fully in our choice, that is from us.
So, in your work as a relationship repair specialist, what do you see as the most sort of common barrier that keeps people stuck in cycles of hurt? Even maybe after they've forgiven their abuser or the people in their life who haven't been very lovingly consistent.
What keeps them stuck?
Mhm.
Oh, it could be a multitude of reasons. It depends on the situation. I'm not a therapist, so I don't go into all of that. If anyone comes to me and needs therapy, I will send them for therapy.
Mm.
I don't do the EMDR and all that stuff. People can get stuck because they will, on the exterior, forgive because maybe they feel coerced into forgiving. I need to forgive or God won't forgive me and all that. So they mouth it, but they don't let go of it in their heart.
Yeah.
And many times that's because they misunderstand what forgiveness is. They hold on to a blame. And blame is only good for a moment. Blame is good for a moment to identify the beginning of where something started. Like, this is the cause. Like, I suffered childhood emotional neglect. My parents did not mean to emotionally neglect me. There was no malice, there was no intention, but that did not mean I was not emotionally neglected. So to be able to say, well, they were the cause of that because they didn't have what I needed to give me, and I can see that without blaming them. I can say, "Oh, well, that was the onset of it," and then I forgive them for what they didn't have. They couldn't have done any better. They did the best they knew how. And if you can frame things in a way like that to separate the who from the do, it changes how you process things on the inside. I know there's a book out there, it's kind of new, and someone I interviewed on my podcast a few years ago about how to heal without forgiveness. I've not read the book, and I don't know what her definition of forgiveness is, but I think that we need to forgive because we need to let go of whatever it is that's being that anchor. It's something that's trying to anchor us somewhere, keep us in a prison of pain or blame or revenge or self-pity or whatever it is. If you can identify what it is that you're feeling, where you're at, then you can address that thing. Are you, I feel sorry for myself. No one did that for me. You're angry. There's a reason. There is something, and you have to uncover that. And it might take sitting with God and say, God, you got to show me this. That's what He did when I was triggered in Arizona for that uh,
Mhm.
trauma that happened when I was 6 years old. I had been triggered before. I was tired. I went home, I sat in a chair, said, God, I'm not getting out of this chair until you help me. And He did. What He did is He took me to what happened inside that trigger, the silent progression that happened in my thought life that I wasn't aware of, the subconscious thoughts that in the fast track brain, as John Wilder calls it, the fast track brain of what went from that trigger and all that subconscious landed me somewhere. And so I sat in that chair and the Lord showed me, what had happened and the thought progression, slowing it down for me to see and what it left me with. Where was I at when I was dumped at the end of that trigger? Where was I sitting? I was sitting in a hole where I was worthless and had no value whatsoever and fully believed it,
Mm.
believed that lie. And how the Lord brought me out of that was something I call a silver bullet, which is a short phrase, has to be short because it has to be simple. And it's something that directly interrupts that thought process that you practice all the time so that when that incident occurs that hits that spot, that hits that trigger where you would normally go through, bam, out of your mouth comes that silver bullet and it stops that cascade. It stops that cascade. And I did that. My silver bullet was 2 words: "You matter," or "I matter." I walked around saying that all the time. "I matter, I matter, I matter, I matter." And it may sound silly, it may sound self-focused, but it was healing. It was building value into me because I felt like I did not have the right to draw breath. I had existential issues because of another trauma that was piled on that, because I had piles of trauma that fit all nice and neatly on top of one another. How I unpack it on my book, Emerging with Wings, it's like it was the enemy using lies to build a wall of darkness around me. And so I had to tear down that wall little by little by little, and they were all intertwined like tangled up Christmas lights. So Lord had to pull them apart one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And that one was really the first one that was addressed head on with the silver bullet of "I matter." But then I I don't suffer from that same trigger anymore because that worked.
Wow, what a powerful tool. Again, simple but powerful. Well, so your process of forgiveness, and because, I think it's important maybe to touch on this a little bit more.
Sure.
I think so many times people think forgiveness is like, um, they resist it, right? Like as though forgiving means forgetting, or forgiving means, we're now justifying what this person has done, and so we hold on, we hold on to the hurt, the anger, the resentment. We carry a grudge, or whatever words we wanna use to basically say, "I don't forgive." But there's this unlinking, I think, that needs to happen from what they did to us
Mhm.
versus what we choose to do going forward. What was that? I mean, that had to have been, it wasn't an immediate process for you, I imagine.
No, well, it was layers, layers, and Lord took me through different things of forgiveness because I suffered trauma in the church. Well, I went to that church when before I got married as an act of forgiveness, as an outward show of my choice to forgive because I knew they had hurt me. And I had walked away from God and then came back to the Lord. And so it was like a new walk with the Lord. I even got rebaptized after that. So I did that, and it was a whole new thing. It wasn't until I was writing my book that I found out what really happened in my soul on that day of that trauma at that church. It's a chapter in my book called Bullseye, and it's the main trauma core in my life that I had hidden so much because I couldn't deal with it. And the Lord unveiled it to me very, very slowly to deal with that.
Mhm.
And one of the things to speak to this forgiveness of what empowered me to be able to forgive all the people that I've forgiven in my life and motivates me to forgive now is little by little coming to trust that God has my best interest at heart. He loves me. It took me 34 years to believe he loved me. That's in my book, Love's Manifesto, free at my website.
Mm.
But when we believe that God has our best interest at heart and he will take care of that, you take that thing and you give it to him and you say, I give you the power to take care of this. Yeah. And before we really get it, we're like, I hope you're going to get him really good, which that's the vindictiveness that's in us, that's in the ego in us. That's the fallen part of us that wants to kill people. Cain wanted to kill Abel, or he did kill Abel. And Saul wanted to kill David, and the Pharisees were all after Jesus. He would get people, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. And that is a natural fallen human thing to want to kill somebody. It's just, it's the flesh. It's the ego that wants to kill. I want revenge. So that's something that has to get remade in Christ and with a new creation, but that's a work of God. We can't do that in our own soul.
Mhm.
But we can
Yeah.
keep saying, "I keep giving it to you. Oh, I dropped it. I'll give it to you again. Oh, I dropped it. I'll give it to you again." Just over and over again. And he is so patient and so kind. And until we really understand his patience and his kindness and his love, it's really hard for us to do that because we're afraid. We're afraid he's not going to have our best interest. We're afraid they're going to get off scot free. We're afraid that he's going to be mad at us. We're afraid of so much because that's a byproduct of the sin that has tainted humanity. But perfect love casts out fear. And the more we get love, which is why I'm all about love, to drive that out, to drive the fear out, to drive the hatred out, to drive the ugly out. Love, that's what we need. And when we can learn to love, but it starts with we have to take his love into ourself first. Because
Yeah.
before we really know how much we are loved by him, we don't have the capacity to love others in that same way. We can try, and he honors every effort we have. I believe that with all my heart. But one of the deepest lessons I went through in learning to love my enemies was when my son was fired from a job that they had hired him a week earlier when his wife was pregnant. And then they would not, he's got unemployment, but they made him pay it back. And the circumstances around this were just so vile because the owner of the company said he never authorized the hiring, but my son had a written offer of employment. He had it in writing.
Mm.
He said, "I never hired you," and all of that, and I was so angry. If I wanted to choke somebody, it would have been him. I and that "I wanna kill you" feeling was really big. That mama bear was, "You hurt my baby, and my daughter-in-law's pregnant," and it's like I was so upset, and I was praying about it, and the Lord told me to do something that I was shocked and astounded and flabbergasted that he told me to do. He told me to bless that man.
Ooh.
And it still brings tears to my eyes because I remember. I hope I always remember. And when my husband and I pray together, and when we prayed together that day, I told him I needed to do that. And while we were praying, I have learned to be obedient. I'm not always perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Don't get me wrong. I wrestled, I argued. I argued first. First, I argued with God.
Are
No, I
you
don't want to
kidding
do that.
me?
Why would you want me to do
Yeah.
that? That's awful. I don't know what I said, but I argued.
Yeah.
I argued, but then he won. And I said I would do it. And praying with my husband with tears streaming down my face, I let the words escape my mouth that I blessed the man. And when I did that, the angst in my heart broke as I gave that to the one who loves me. I gave that to the one who loves that man who is being so awful. And I don't know. I have no contact with this man. I have no idea what the Lord's done in his life or hasn't done, or if, I haven't followed up on that. That's not mine. That's not
Mm.
mine to own. But I was able to let that go and give that to him. And the Lord has taken care of us. Lord has taken care of us. Was it easy? No. But he walked us through and we all have survived. And now my son's in a
Absolutely.
whole different industry. Praise God for that. And
Mhm.
it's wonderful.
It's amazing how sometimes, when we're going through something, I like to use the metaphor of canyon walls, like the Grand Canyon, the walls seem so high and it's so narrow going through, this canyon walls and you can't see around, you don't know what's coming. And then you come out of that difficulty, that season, and you're looking down on those walls and you think that what seems so insurmountable and never ending seems so small now, sometimes, the being able to look back and go, That was so difficult, but I have this but now I know why I went through it, and I have this totally different perspective of what that was like. You know, you've written 5 books, that that blend storytelling and faith and emotional recovery. Which one was the hardest to write, and why? And I'm assuming they're all behind you on the shelf behind you, so are those your 5
The
books?
3 that are in paperback are, yes, the other 2
Okay,
are
cool.
just digital.
Okay.
What was the
Which one was
hardest
hardest?
one to write? Probably the first one was the hardest one,
Emerging with wings,
Merging with
yeah.
Wings.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And that makes sense, right? Because that was the first step in putting yourself out there. If you could go back, we're getting close to the end here. If you could go back and speak to your younger self, what would you tell her now about her worth, her faith, and the power of healing?
Well, I finally did it. I wrote a letter to my younger self, and it's on my website. I've seen people do that. I watched it for many years, and it took me a long time to do it. I did it a few years back, and what I did in that letter is I went through the different traumas in my life, and I spoke to each one of them. But the bottom line of each one of them, and what I said at the end is, "Hold on, you're gonna make it. Everything's gonna be okay."
Mm, I love that. Danielle, how do people find you?
I have a website, daniellebernock.com. It's DanielleBernock.com. You can get to my YouTube channel, the recordings from my podcast I had for 3 seasons there, my coaching, my speaking, my blog, all my free stuff. I even have a page of other resources, books by other people that you can get there. Love's Manifesto is free at my website. It's one of my books. I have my books are there. All my social medias, you can connect to me there because I'm on a whole bunch of social medias, but I made everything central so you can go to one place and find whatever you need.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well,
It's been a
thank you for having
pleasure.
me.
It's been a pleasure to have you. All right, everybody. That wraps up another episode. But, you know, this is such an important message. I work with so many people, and I just to validate what you're saying, Danielle, I think this struggle of you know, finding value within ourselves and loving ourselves in a healthy way is something that the world needs so much more of. So, for those of you listening, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, please leave a quick review and share it with someone you love. Okay. Your support means that this gets passed out to other people who really need this. And there are so many people out there who are needing hope. They're needing encouragement. They're needing truth. So, you know, and think about how love transforms a marriage, you know, because as a marriage therapist, that's ultimately, you know, what I want people to take away from this is that you cannot you cannot burden your spouse with the need to make you feel valued. You have to do that for yourself. Okay? So if you're ready to do that, if you're ready to transform your marriage, to learn how to love yourself, to heal from the past, to know that you truly have worth and value in God's eyes, please reach out to me, debbiecaudle.com/marriage in bloom, and let's start making your own transformation. All right, that's it for today. Remember, as always, I always say, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to remain teachable. So I'll see you next week.